Right. Well, I guess my first experience with computer games was the Apple II. Got one in 1980, been playing all those little games for, well, forever. And I never really took seriously the fact that you could get into the industry and get a job actually making games. I mean, it's like, you know, real people don't do that. You know, that was kind of how I put it. So, you know, pretty much went through high school and, you know, I did some programming on the side, little gamey type things, but nothing serious. And I went to college, got a computer science degree. While I was in college, I started doing computer animation. So I kind of did that, some 3D design and stuff like that. So I started hitting companies up for getting a artist job, 3D art type thing. And that was pretty cool. If I had actually tried doing that like a year before, everyone would have been like, oh my gosh, you know, 3D modeling, you know, come here. But by then, everyone started to already know it, and then they started hiring like real artists, which I wasn't, and taught them 3D art. So I didn't really do too well getting a job there. And I'd come to Raven like a year before that, actually, before I'd gotten out of college, because they were in the same town, University of Wisconsin-Madison. As I interviewed there, didn't get the job then. When I graduated, you know, after my kind of not very successful attempt at getting in as an artist, I called them again. They're like, hey, you could help us out a bit on Shadowcaster. They were finishing that up. Did a little bit of script work from that, and then I went on to try getting a job again, and didn't do too good a job. But I kept getting back to them, and eventually, you know, they remembered they needed somebody as a programmer. You know, oh my gosh, I guess I was actually using my computer science degree, I thought. And they hired me on as that. As far as my computer science degree, yeah, a lot of people at Raven did get a degree, but in the short run, it was really like the demonstration stuff that I'd done. I did a little like demo of a game, Discs of Tron, if anyone remembers that game. I did kind of a game like that. Simple demo, you know, but you could, you know, run around and shoot and discs would bounce off the walls and stuff like that. That was enough to make them remember me, and like I said, it was enough to make them call me back later. So persistence in my case really helped.
I have to go with persistence as well for me as a writer. I went to U of T for 4 years, University of Toronto, for psychology. Had no plans of being a writer or anything. Then I started really getting into gaming and the internet kind of just before the web was born, when it was still pretty text-based. And I pitched 102.1 The Edge, you guys may listen to CFNY, whatever. I'm doing a radio show called Mark's Web Watch, and I've been doing it now for 3 years. So I started, I guess, in the industry 3 years ago. From there, I thought, oh, it would be so cool to do a book based on the best of the web. But so through persistence, I just sent letters to every book publisher I could find. And sure enough, I got lucky. I got Macmillan in the States to call me and say, well, we don't want to do best of the net, but we see that by your resume, you review games part-time for Toronto Computes, free press paper here. So they said, hey, we already have an author, but you want to write with this guy to write this book? And I was like, whoa, yeah, sure. So I did this book called Internet Games Directory, and that came out, I was done September 96, and then it's like, okay, should I go back to my bill collector job? Or, you know, so I just said, you know, screw it, this is great, working from home. And just through the snowball effect, it just was great. I was getting bigger and bigger pubs, starting with like, you know, Canada Computes, and I still write for the Toronto Star on Thursdays. And then I started getting like calls from, Next Gen and USA Today and Playboy magazine, and then I just did a couple more books. And there's an article I wrote on the evolution of the 3D shooter on GameSpot that the guys from id called me and asked me to do the manual for Quake 2. So it was both id and Activision actually. And then with the Quake 2 manual, they said, oh, we got a really hot game coming up called Sin. We need someone to come down as a freelancer to you know, give some flavor to the manual and stuff. So, and then up to now, I just now I write for about 40 pubs worldwide, and my last book is called I finished it 2 weeks ago. It's called Game Design: Secrets of the Sages, where I interviewed 145 of these guys on their tips and tricks and secrets on breaking into the industry, as well as I've got chapters on programming and art and animation and sound design, And that comes out through Macmillan at the end of March.
For those of you who don't know, I'm Richard Gray, and level designer. There definitely is no schooling or preparation for level designing other than doing it. So I fell into the industry back in Doom when DEU came out. I don't know if any of you remember it. It was a real old editor for Doom. And just out of passion, that's the other key word besides persistence is almost everyone that's in the industry got in here because it's nothing's going to stop them. This is what they're going to do, whether they get paid for it, or, no matter what. So I was definitely one of those that done 4 Doom unit levels, uploaded them to CompuServe, and caught the eye of Nick Newhart, who was working on Blood, First Blood game, back before it was transferred over to Monolith. And at the time he was working with, somebody here? At the time they were working connected with Apogee, which was my fortune because they saw my Blood levels and were working on Duke Nukem. You heard of that one? And hired me full-time to come down to Garland, Texas to work on Duke, which was definitely my starfall. So I definitely fell into it. And now, I think I all know, our last game was Sin. About 5 of us left Apogee with our ego trips and made our own company, which is happening a lot lately. And last game was Sin. And that was it.
So I've had a pretty circuitous route to get to where I've come to as well. I started off, I built my first computer out of a kit when I was 12, and I sort of played around in a lot of programming and a lot of just general hobbyist things. But I always kind of resisted it, I think partly because at the time computers were kind of new and everyone tried to pigeonhole me as saying, oh, well, Kevin's going to be a computer geek and that's what he's going to do. And I was like, no, I'm going to go totally the opposite direction. So I actually went to the University of Southern California where I majored in film production and worked in the film industry for a couple of years. But ultimately, I continued to work on projects in various capacities in software. And I ended up kind of focusing a little bit on technology and a little bit on business, which was probably the best thing that I did. I ended up, after a while, getting involved with Ziff Davis Publishing as a journalist, although actually, ironically, not on any game publications. From there, I went and built up sort of a general expertise with technology and went to work for a game software company called Mindscape, based in the San Francisco Bay Area, and did a lot of different roles there that range from technology and product development to business development to marketing to basically a lot of different things. From there, I kept pestering Microsoft, telling Microsoft where they'd gone wrong and what the mistakes were and that sort of stuff, and eventually they kind of felt frustrated enough that they said, well, you're so smart, you come figure it out. So that's how I ended up at Microsoft.
Yeah, same, well, not the same, but like many of you, just a general gaming, since a little kid background. But into high school, I ended up working at the local video game room in the early to mid 80s. Ended up keeping that job as I got into college, while as the video game room boom died off, that went out of business. So I didn't do much, within the industry, so to speak, even at a local level. Until I got out of school, then into Microsoft again, about 8 years later, and got into the hardware group as a beta coordinator for a product called Windows Printing System, but stayed in the hardware group essentially for 3 years, and then they came out with the Sidewinder 3D Pro joystick, and I was asked by the marketing manager to be a product manager on that product. And long story short, went from product manager to a technical evangelist, now dev relations manager. Just like gaming, just work hard at it and got where I'm at today. So persistence definitely pays off, but you just do what you enjoy, and that's about it.
How many of you guys really want to get into the games business? Okay, good. And how many have any clue right now, or is that why you're here, to kind of hear what we did? Kind of looking for a path. Do you have some idea, or does anybody have any idea? Yeah? Okay. I mean, I took a little bit different route than these guys in that, I've always loved games and done, Atari, television, ColecoVision, all those kinds of things from the early days. And, but I had no idea how to get in. I was from Oklahoma, and, a little podunk town, in the middle of nowhere. Silicon Valley was just a faraway place, and in the late 80s, the Sound Blaster came out and kind of revolutionized gaming in terms of audio on the PC, and I thought, wow, that's pretty cool, but still no idea how to get into it. So went to school, industrial engineering, it's pretty standard stuff, but still love gaming. They just happened to show up in my town and had a technical support facility there. So I joined up answering phones, tech support. So when you call in and you have problems, you were talking to someone like me. And that was the easiest way for me to get involved. But just through hard work and knowing what I wanted to do, I worked my way up in that organization and wound up in their corporate offices in California. And then as I left that company, I looked for, what in 3D gaming, what would make an impact in the industry, and found 3D effects. Thought that they would be kind of cool, even though that they were small at the time. And it turned out really well. So that's kind of how I got in, is just not necessarily stumbling into it. I wanted to get into it, but didn't know how, and just found any crack I could find and went for it. So.
I think that's the same with all of us, if I can just interrupt for a sec. Some of us stumbled into it, but I would say some of us definitely were looking for that opportunity, and as soon as that opportunity presented itself, all of us just jumped at the chance right away.
Yeah, I agree with that. I used to just play a lot of old Apple II games, and just never really thought, that I just was like a mystery who made these games, and just never really considered it as an occupation I could pursue in the future, or something that's like actually feasible. So I used to just sit around in Barnes & Noble and read all these game programming and assembly books, and used to just wow, wouldn't it be cool, who actually makes these games, And so I went to school for computer engineering. I was there and just played around with some demos and stuff. I was all ready to go into the computer security industry. I had a job lined up for that. And then one of my friends, he was doing some Quake mods. And he just enlightened me. He's like, this is every area of computing, every area of coding that you ever wanted to do, and all in one. And I was like, wow, that's really true. And I never realized that before. So when he put it that way, I was like, all right. So I stuck around for another year in school. I got my master's degree. I did some more work in computer graphics, OpenGL. I did some demos. A friend of mine went out to Intel, and he was interviewing there with a graphics group. And he said he saw this demo out there, and they were doing this adaptive. They're changing the level of detail on the fly with a continuous level of detail, depending on the processor, depending on the video card. And I was like, damn, that's cool. And so when he came back, we started working on a project, just continuous level of detail. And I had this. I just downloaded this model from there. It was this cow. It was 5,500 polys or something. And I put it through some of this process and just reduced it down into this mesh. So then we whipped up this demo for a class, and it just, you could refine. You could just use the mouse to drag the polys count up and down. And so it had this rotating blue cow, and just spin around. You could just change the level of detail. But it was fun. But that demo did come in handy for me when it came time to graduate. I showed the demo. I heard there was this games company over at we have this incubator center for startup companies at the university, and so I heard there was a game company there. I showed him the demo. I showed Kartik the demo, and he liked it. And they needed somebody to work on Terminus for the graphics, and so we went from there. Been there since. Been there about a year now.
Actually, I needed a poor staff to write a software renderer for Terminus, and he was it. He was ready to,
Nobody else is
ready to
stupid
break
enough.
in and stick it out and write a software renderer. And now he's wrapping up on the D3D renderer for Terminus, and it's looking really good. But it was a demo that really he was able to really show off what his skills were. And when you're hiring, you really want to have people who have enough of a background that they can just pick up something and go. They're probably writing something brand new, but they got to learn really fast. While working on it, because you usually have such tight deadlines, and that's some of the characteristics we look for, and Jesse fit that bill. But let me ask you guys, how many of you guys are in school right now, whether it's high school or college? All right, that's pretty cool. I wanted to get into the games industry really bad, ever since I was really young, and I was in high school, and I wanted to start a company. I started playing different adventure games, and there's a game called Mean Streets from Access. It was, VGA graphics. It had primitive full motion video. And I said, wow, this is a great game. I really like it. I can do that. what do I know, But it was basically my brother and I got a couple of buddies from high school, and we said, all right, we're going to start a company, we're going to make a game, and it's going to be better than this. And we hadn't gotten a clue. I mean, none of us were programmers. I mean, that was like a big problem right there. And so we were like, okay, what can we do here? And well, it turned out that as we were really trying to pick apart these games, and we said, okay, this is a little bit more complicated than enough more than we could chew. And but we were still like totally adamant about writing games, and we were working on our first game design, and it took forever. I mean, I was in high school, and it wasn't until after I graduated from high school that we got a publishing deal for the game. What we did actually before we got the publishing deal was we said, all right, none of us can write a game engine. We accepted that fact, and so we said, all right, what are we going to do? And I said, all right, let's license a game engine. And, well, we got no money. All right, we better talk fast and see if we can get an engine. And we did that, and we licensed the game engine. Actually, it was used by Access Software for a follow-up game from Mean Streets, Martian Memorandum, and we were able to license the technology for that for our first product. And because we had a commercial engine that had some proven success, and we had a really good design. I mean, we actually spent so much time on the storyline and the design. That's what convinced the people who owned the engine to license it to us. And we actually did a deal where we didn't have to pay anything up front for it, and it was like all on royalties. And they were cool with it because we were just really trying to make something happen, and we were just totally gung ho. And that's how we really got the ball rolling, and we wound up hiring some freelance like artists, and we just kind of scraped together money to get the project going until we got a publishing deal for it. And it was really hard. I was in college when we got the first publishing deal, and it took us 2 years to finish that game. It wasn't as big as as I thought it was going to be as far as like making a splash in the industry, but that was like primarily because we were working on it for so long. The technology got kind of outdated, but it was still a really cool game. I did a couple of different games, a couple of titles before we really moved on to Terminus, and I was finishing college at the time. And by that point, I kind of got smart enough to say, all right, we're going to have to find some really good coders and people who really know what they're doing. And that's what we did. I found like people in college who I knew who were really good, and they all wanted to like break in. And that's how we really formed the company and got it going. And shortly before I graduated from college, we got actual venture capital from investors who were willing to back the company. And we built the company, based off of that. And during this whole time, I had worked like several different jobs to keep this thing going, and worked at a couple of different companies. One, a publishing company, as well as a hardware company called Forte Technologies. They developed the Gravis ultrasound sound card and went on to do the VFX1 VR headset. And I was able to do like tech support. I did trade shows. I didn't get paid for doing trade shows. I just went to trade shows. They like paid my bill, and I worked my ass off, and I like met a lot of people within the industry, and that's how I really got to meet people and try to make deals happen. And right now the company's at about 18 people. We're moving to a new building that's under construction, and we'll be at like 30 people like in the next month. We've got Terminus, which will be coming out later this year, and we've also got some PlayStation, Nintendo 64, and Game Boy Color projects in the works that we've got some publishing deals for. So, it's been a long time. It's been like 8, going on 9 years or so since originally had the dream to like want to be in the games business. And now it's pretty cool because we're bringing in like people into the company who've been in the industry for several years, like really kick-ass project managers and coders and artists. And we all have like the same dream. We're still a small company. We want to make some really innovative stuff, and that's kind of our goals now. Learned a lot by doing it, and we've learned a lot of things that we shouldn't do. Number one, biting off like too much for our first project. That finishing a game is so important, and it took us forever to finish that first game because it was so huge. And I wouldn't do that again. But I mean, there's a lot of lessons.
What about Terminus?
Well, yeah, Terminus is like way out of control as far as like the scope of the project, but that's like almost 2 years in development, and independently financed. But it's a product that we believe in. It's something that we have to do, and because we're so damn stubborn in that sense, we'll get it done. But in any case, there's a lot of lessons that we've learned, and a lot of things we won't do again. And in hindsight, there are better ways of breaking in than the way I did it. But you get a lot of experience by doing it. Got the scars to prove it. That's pretty much it. Chris?
We've really identified two key things here that you really have to have just to get into this industry. And that's persistence pays off, and having the passion also. The passion for myself and my brother Glenn over there, started from when Pong came out, and then like the next game I remember playing was Tank. Just a stand-up arcade, and then 2 sticks there and the little thing moving around, and that was it. And then we eventually started getting more consoles. And then we even went as far as buying a couple of stand-ups like Tempest and Asteroids Deluxe, and it was an obsession, plain and simple. We just wanted, to have every different type of gaming, platform out there. Read all the magazines. That's something else I really can't stress enough. Next Generation magazine, as well as some other magazines out there. There's so much information in there. So many key contacts also. A lot of people that I'm calling up, trying to get these people interested in Gamescon, I just steal these names directly from Next Generation. Bernie Stoller in charge of Sega. Okay, fine, and then I work on getting his phone number next. And, so, having that passion and having that persistence is very, very important.
And don't kid yourself, it's a lot of hard work.
Oh, it is.
We all have done our 16 to 20 hour days, weeks in a row. It's a lot of hard work.
I think there's a lot of myths about the industry also. It's fun, well, let's go down the table and talk about that, because sometimes I'm sure it's not fun at all. And then also the money side, getting into it, and I'm sure a lot of people think that, everybody in the industry makes huge amounts of money. And I think that is somewhat of a myth to a certain extent also. So why don't you guys just all kind of, chip in about, things like that. How fun is it? How hard work is it?
Actually, I didn't get to really introduce myself. I'm Chris Winters again, Vicarious Visions. I don't know if there's any artists here. I mean, I get the impression most of the people here are programmers, but speaking from another vantage point, again, like everyone else, passion, love for the games, but growing up, again, I didn't know who did these things, how they were done. They were just a big question. I just dismissed, thinking this is a dream job and I'll never have it, But later on, going in college, my background was fine art, did graphic design, industrial design, worked for a lot of companies, and a lot of the knowledge and the skills that I learned doing web stuff, doing print stuff, whatever, it translates into any field that deals with art. And later on, when I had the opportunity and I said, I'm working all these hours doing a graphic design job, I enjoy it, but I don't love it. And I'm thinking, I wish I had more time to play some games. And then I thought to myself, well, if I'm working to play the games and I'm doing design, I'm doing art, why not just take the next step and just simply do art and design for games? And now I'm sort of accomplishing my greatest love, and I'm able to put in a work week and get paid for it all at the same time. And so basically it just took me one day to just simply say goodbye to my job, goodbye to my location, start over, and it's been very successful for me so far. But I mean, talking about problems and the dedication, I mean, it's not necessarily always just a leap of faith and it's going to pay off. There is an enormous amount of work. I mean, you might get a job and say, listen, we need this whole game done in 3 months. 3 months. And you got to do all the work, all the animation, the CG design, complete artwork from scratch. And it's so easy to just simply say, sure, it'll get done. But then you realize you got to translate this into hours. And pretty soon you realize, well, okay, maybe 2 hours a week to sleep. It's about all you got that's left. But again, if you enjoy what you're doing, the days just go by relatively quickly. And I mean, no matter what snags I've personally had, when it's all done, you actually see this thing up on the screen and you're playing it, and you get a couple hours of sleep, and you realize that you had a good fun run doing it. So, anyone else want to talk about the trials and tribulations?
Well, I think, can't stress, you can't really think too much about the hours, because it's just a lot, and it can get overwhelming at times, and it can get very frustrating as well. And you kind of, it's almost like in some cases, depending on, how far you are along in getting into the industry or making yourself a success, you kind of have to make a lifestyle choice in a way. that sometimes you're going to have to just work so hard, and everything else, has to come second, and a lot of sacrifices and some really tough choices. Personally, I think that it's really cool to start young in this business, because as you get older, you got all sorts of other commitments that can really bar you from entering the business, and also being really successful at it. Because every time like a new game comes out, the bar is raised, and the level of work, the quality, and the creativity, what you need to produce, just goes up and up and up, and it just becomes increasingly difficult to produce really top-notch titles. And so not only do you need to be talented, but you just got to be ultra focused, at doing the job, and just say all this other stuff, even things like E3 and ECTS trade shows, all the cool stuff. That's all fun, but at the end of the day, you got to really focus on the work and deliver. And finishing is really, really hard. And that's why it's important to be able to demonstrate to prospective employers that you can actually start something and finish it. And that this is what you set out to do, and I did it. And I think they look for that. When you have people, I look at resumes all the time, and then sometimes I look at resumes where people have started some really cool projects and they got some cool stuff to show, but they never got it done, or they're hopping from one company to another company, never actually starting on a project. When the project started, and being there when it's done. They quit midstream or something and move on to something else. Those are warning flags, and to be able to demonstrate that you can stay focused, have a very positive attitude. That's also really important. You got to have a really good perspective and a positive attitude about it, because sometimes it just gets you just have to just keep at it, and what you want to do, you want to go to bed, you want to quit, you want to do something else, and you can't do that if you really want to win. But alongside the persistence and the hard work is really the passion, and the passion is what I think drives most of us here, not all of us. I think the passion is really what got us in the first place, and what keeps us going. Yeah.
Making games is a lot of fun, but being a game programmer or artist is not fun. What you do every day when you come in is not fun. It really isn't. When you sit down, you're basically coding, you're fixing bugs, you're doing that sort of thing. But the process of making a game is unbelievable, and that's what draws us to it. So
it is a real challenge, a huge challenge.
Yeah, it is. And so, the best things about making games are being on a team with a lot of people that you can talk to and exchange ideas, seeing sort of a game come to life. That's why we're all in this industry. But day to day, what you have to do is a lot of pain. It is. There's just no way around it, because you're tracking down, well, gee, it should be working right. Everything that I wrote just, I don't understand why this texture goes behind that other texture, because when I put the model together, it was fine. That's the sort of stuff that you deal with. And if you have the persistence to be able to do that, if you can be very focused, as he was saying, that's what's going to pay off. And there's nothing like it. It's the same thing when you're writing a novel. It's the same thing when you're making a film or working on a television show. The act of producing something creative is a lot of fun, but the specific tasks that you go through are very difficult and very arduous, and you have to be willing to, to make that kind of commitment to it, especially when, you're 3 months behind schedule, and, you have to make payroll, and you're not going to get another, check from the publisher until that happens.
I don't think there's an argument that you guys have the passion. To be here at noon on a Sunday is tough. So we know that you guys want to get into gaming, and that's exactly, everybody's talking about passion and persistence, and there's no doubt about it. If any of you want to be a writer, a freelance writer, such as myself, that again also has trials and tribulations as well. It may sound very cool to play games for a living, and it is to some extent, but as mirrored by some of the things that's said here, you don't exactly get a chance to play other games that much, especially when you're working on a development team for different reasons. So ironically, sometimes you get in the industry because you think it's so much fun, but it's a lot of work. For example, if you work from home, forget it if you're a TV person, because you'll never get anything done. You'll sit around in your boxer shorts all day and watch, Jerry Springer. So you got to be totally disciplined. You got to sit at your PC, and for you guys that are either programming at home or want to be a writer, it's the same thing. There's a million distractions from working at home. You have no one looking over your shoulder to make sure things are done. You got your buddies calling you who are bored to death at their 9-to-5 job, What I call you and say, so, you know, do you get a copy of that Rainbow Six expansion pack? You know, burn me a copy? You get guys like that all the time, right? Well, this is the kind of stuff that I go through every day, right? Then there's the traveling, you know, that takes a big toll on you. So, I mean, with every occupation, no matter how glorious it sounds, there's always some downsides as well. So, you got to have that passion, you got to have that persistence and discipline, and it all pays off because, you know, I can't speak, these guys create games, these guys create universes that we all dig, so I don't have that kind of gratification, but seeing your article on the front cover of whatever magazine, that's a different kind of gratification. So it's all rewards and punishments. You got to weigh it out, and you know, whatever gets you up in the middle of the night and just with a stupid grin ear to ear going, wow, you know, I want to either make a game that's going to sell as much as Quake 2 or Age of Empires or whatever, or I want to write and tell other gamers about how cool this is and get a chance to interview these guys. You know, you got to realize what's important to you, and you really do have to throw out all the other things that are going to pull you down, such as, you know, having to come in and stare blankly at code, or whether you want to, you know, turn off the tube and say, okay, Ricky Lake, another day, I'm going to do my work. So it's discipline.
To expand on that a little bit, I mean, if you look at any game that's created today and look at the credits, there are a lot of people involved in making a game. And every one of us have their ultimate game they'd love to make in their mind. If you approach a software publisher or anybody else and say, I've got this cool idea for a game, everyone has a cool idea for a game. That's not enough to get you into the game business. You have to figure out what you want to do, whether you're a programmer, an artist, a writer, a producer. I'm none of those things. I don't program, I can't draw, I can't do anything. So the only way, yeah, seriously.
Don't be too hard.
The only way I can get into the game business was to support people, to talk to the game developers, to represent a technology or whatever. And so, you know, my people skills was the only thing I had to rely on in order to try and get into the games business. And it was enough, and I'm in the games business. And maybe one of these days I'll be able to create a cool game and learn the skills that I need to do that. In the meantime, I had to take what I could get. So it's not enough just to have a cool game idea. You really have to focus on what your skills are and use those to do it. If it's beta testing, if it's QA, if it's design, whatever it may be.
How many people here want to start their own game company or like just work on their own game at home? That sort of thing?
Kill them all.
Okay. All right. Shut the doors, start the gas. It's a brutal time out there. It's really tough. We deal with a lot of game developers. We deal with about as many as you probably are aware of, because chances are that if they're publishing a title or they're in a magazine review or they're on a website somewhere, we're talking to them. We deal with basically all the hardware manufacturers as well. The fact is, there aren't really any hard and fast rules, as I think you may have heard when we were all sort of talking about where we came from. But there are sort of some guidelines. There are some paths that are easier than others. And what I've seen, I mean, just sort of sitting here thinking about it, I can think of five basic guidelines that come off the top of my head, and some of them you've already heard. The first one is you've got to specialize as much as possible, right? I mean, it's not enough to be an artist or a programmer. You've got to be a programmer who is really, really good at writing rasterization layers for action games. I mean, you know, something that really distinguishes you, because ultimately at the end of the day, you've got to be valuable to a company, and the way that you're valuable is by providing some sort of service that is very hard for them to find. You know, either nobody else does it or very few people do it. So the more that you can do to think of something really specific other than, I love games, I'm going to make a game. Be as specific as you possibly can and try to specialize. The second thing that's really important to do is to learn everything you can about that area that you're going to specialize in. It's not enough to go onto Blues News every day or to, you know, onto Voodoo Extreme and know about the industry and know every game that's ever come out. Frankly, to some extent, that might actually be a detriment, because you might find yourself falling into where the industry has been instead of where it could be going. So learn as much as you can about specifically how to do 3D graphics programming, or how to do art, or how to do, you know, whatever it is that you want to focus on. Learn about the actual craft, not so much about the industry, although obviously having industry expertise, knowing about games, that sort of stuff is very valuable. Once you've done that, work on your own kind of creative portfolio. Instead of starting up your own games company, do something that shows that you're good at what it is that you're doing. Come up with some really neat new sorting algorithm, or some sort of code that explains that you can do it, or some demonstration that's not really a finished game that you intend to bring to market, but demonstrates the capabilities that you do. And once you do that, you can go to a company, in any role, and try to get yourself in. Talk to the people. Don't talk to the president of the company. Usually go and talk to the guys who are programmers on the different teams, or the guy who's the head of development, or the lead artist, or that sort of thing. Persuade that person that you have that sort of specialization that you've worked on by showing them your portfolio. So that's sort of the second thing that you can do. The third thing is, once you're in, get experience at that company. Do anything that you can. Do everything that you can within your area. Take advantage of any opportunities that come up. If somebody says, hey, we need somebody to try to figure out how to do the menu option screens for the game, go do that, right? Because that's how you'll create your role. So do more than you might have done, just basically if you took the job description of the game. Try to go beyond that, okay? It's really hard to start up your own company from scratch in software development, because it's very, very expensive to produce a game, to produce the kinds of games that you're playing today. Most games, the average budget now is somewhere around $2 million. I mean, it's just, unless you have $2 million that you want to invest to try to get other people to help you out, it's going to be very hard to produce the kinds of games that are available commercially. So what your goal has to be is to get the expertise and develop the experience, create contacts with other people, so that rather than starting up your own company, and again, remember that this isn't a hard and fast rule, this is more sort of the norm, you can branch out and create your own sort of spin-off company. Go and produce a group that is, all the members have their own unique talents, and go and build a company once you have developed your skills and your expertise. The thing that you want to do when you go and spin out and start start producing games on your own is to reduce risk wherever possible, and that goes all throughout the development process. When developers talk about risk and minimizing risk and identifying and managing and mitigating risks, what they're talking about is anything that could delay the eventual shipment of the product. So that means not having enough money, that means not having people with the right tools, that means taking on too much of a task, that means anything that could derail the eventual shipment of the product. Because that's what a publisher is going to look for, is how are you going to deliver this? Why is the game going to sell, and how are you actually going to ship a product? I mean, we've all heard probably about the titles that had a lot of potential. You saw great screenshots, you went, wow, that looks really cool. Where are these titles now? Well, generally, the companies that were producing them didn't do a really good job of minimizing their risks, and they went out of business. And that's going to be key when you start talking to publishers. I want to digress a little bit. There's been sort of a lot of misunderstanding about what the role of a publisher is and why you have to deal with a publisher, why you can't just sort of make a game and take it to retail. Publishers serve a very, very important role. They assume basically all the financial risk. They'll pay you your salary. They'll pay you, so that you have enough money to pay the rent for your offices. They'll pay you so you have enough blank CDs to burn the CDs. I mean, they'll do all of that stuff. In exchange, what they expect is the majority of the money that comes in. Now, that may not be fair because, damn it, it's your creative idea and you had the idea, and they're taking credit for all that. But the fact is, they're assuming all that risk. Your game doesn't sell, you go out of business. You're not going to give all that money back unless they can somehow track you down and make you go work for them for 500 years to pay back the $2 million that they gave you. The fact is that you're expecting, they're taking a shot at what you're trying to deliver, and in exchange, they expect to be able to participate in the return. So what you have to persuade them is, why will it sell, right? What's unique about this game that's going to make it sell? And how are you going to actually deliver something at the end of 18 months or 2 years? And so that's what you've got to do. And so that takes me to rule number 4, which is the importance of the business guy. I think that that's probably the role that's sort of most underappreciated. Everybody knows sort of what the programmer does. Everybody knows what the designer and the level designer do, and the artists and the sound guys. But if you do find yourself in a position where you are going to start up your own company and try to make a run for it, or if you're going to spin off from another company, you've got to get yourself a really kick-ass business guy. And that's something that even Brian could do, I think. Probably. The business guy is going to do three things for you. The first thing is that he's going to make sure that you're disciplined, that the project keeps moving, that you're meeting your milestones. He's also the one who's going to help you to reduce the risks. He's going to help you make the decision whether you want to build the technology or buy, license an engine, if you want to acquire artwork somewhere else, how you're actually going to do this so that you mitigate the risk wherever possible. And the third thing is he's going to focus on all the sort of non-game stuff so that you can actually specialize again, which goes back to rule number one, specialize on your area. So the programmers are just programming, and the artists are just doing art, and the sound guys are just doing sound, and the level guys are doing level. And I'm sure that if Richard had to focus on making sure that payroll got processed every week, that you never cease it, right? So again, I'd have a new car though. You would have a new car, but you got to specialize. So the last thing is, again, reduce risks wherever possible. I mean, even the guys at Vicarious were just saying, Terminus, went out of control and it got really huge and it went beyond the initial scope. I mean, I'm sure that that's sort of, that they're really focused on what the game is, and I'm sure that's sort of overstatement. But that is stuff that we hear generally from companies that aren't as successful as they are. If you allow things to go beyond the scope by trying to do everything too much too quickly, then that's how things escalate to the point where you see 3-year development cycles. You decide that you're going to do the very, very best 3D rendering technology and the very, very best game scripting language and the very, very best, storyline and level design and art and all that sort of stuff. If you sit down initially and you spend the time to really get a good plan together, and then you're just absolutely fastidious about making sure that you don't, it'd be really cool to add in that new feature or that new AI, but it might add another 6 months to the schedule. You've got to ship your product. There's always your second product. There's always your ability to improve and to add on what you've done. So I mean, I think that's sort of the stuff that we're seeing among companies that are sort of most successful is, they really, and people who are most successful is that they find an area that you just associate with them absolutely first and foremost, and then they have the discipline to make sure that they go forward and stay focused on all that stuff.
That was beautiful, man. That was everything.
Like, why are we here?
That was But then there's the black side, though. You're going to lose your girlfriend or boyfriend, or your girlfriend and boyfriend. You're going to start smoking and drinking. You're going to call your crack pipe by its first name. So it's not all fun. Seriously, that was like everything right there.
Yeah, now two things always happen at Microsoft, especially after we ship an operating system. You always see about half the people get divorced and the other people, the wives are suddenly pregnant.
Married the divorcees.
Yeah, so you either get divorced or you get pregnant after this sort of stuff happens. Because it's true. It's because you do have to be disciplined, and you are focused during that development process first and foremost on getting that thing to ship.
Well, I hear a lot of horror stories coming out. I mean, I hope we haven't terrified everyone and just leaving the room and running away and never looking back. But I'd say one thing, I mean, there's tons of sacrifice and hard work and stuff. But, I'll get in that mode for a day and then I'll turn around and look like, hey, I love my job. And that's really awesome. And I think that's part of passion. I mean, you spend all this time, but somehow, through all this work and everything, it's worth it. You really end up enjoying with what you come out with. So that's really important to me, is to make sure that I'm interested in what I'm doing. Otherwise, I mean, great, now I just have a regular old day-to-day job that I work 100 hours at. I mean, nobody does that. So there must be something to doing what you want to do.
Tell them about the Twinkie.
If we weren't getting
Twinkie.
something out of this, we basically just wouldn't do it. I mean, we're all here for a reason, because after the long days and the long hours, you do enjoy what you do. I mean, at the end of the week, I realize for the programmers sometimes that can be really hard. I mean, I've seen the frustration of some of the programmers trying to track down a bug for a couple days, but when they finally find it, they're like, woohoo, pizza party, and then go out and have some fun. So
No, it's not. It's like, oh shit, those 3 days were just wasted.
Next bug.
Well, one thing that, pretty much most of you have is that you're young, and that's, getting passion when you're young is really really the key. And there's something that I really found out, because I field a lot of resumes from a lot of people who want to get into the industry. And, I get all types. I get somebody who's a freshman in high school. I get people who are like 50 and want to get into the industry. And one thing, like I said, a lot of you have, being young, that's really key in a way. Starting now is definitely something that just is worth your while, because there's something, like, let me give you an example. I get a resume from some guy who does database programming, and hey, I do this stuff for Lotus. I don't know. I'm really good at database programming, and I really want to break in the industry, and I make $90,000 making $90,000 a year American making databases. Well, okay, we do pretty well in the industry, but I'm not going to be able to give this guy a job and pay him the same amount, because the amount of experience he has in games is nothing. And then suddenly he wants to get into it and thinks he's going to be able to keep the same lifestyle. No way. I mean, once you get established in a career path, you get used to a certain salary level, you're not willing to make those sacrifices. You have responsibilities. Like, I've seen a lot, like, we've given a few people jobs that just said, hey, we're willing to give you a chance. We don't really have, we're just willing to, see how you work out. We'll give you a spot, but you have to get down here, yourself, and if you show up, and we'll give you a job and you can start. Not everyone can just drop everything. I drag two wives, yeah. A wife and 2 kids and a dog, and, a house and everything.
Some more.
Yeah, 2 wives.
Well, as long as they don't know each other.
Yeah. Isn't that normal? No, but not everyone can just drop everything and do it. And I'm not out to disillusion anyone who has those types of responsibilities, but certain people out here in the audience do have that as a little edge, that they can make that sacrifice and say, hey, I'm going to be able to start up and see how things work out. So you got a question on that?
Yeah, Tom Brill from Sega's office. I was just wondering if you can give some of the programmers up there, if you can give some of these younger guys direction in terms of what degrees they should be looking for. Say some of these high school students that are now planning their college careers. Are there specific colleges that really specialize where their computer science department is really geared towards gaming? Any advice you can give them in that respect?
Well,
I think in this industry, having a degree is not as important as having the knowledge that the degree represents.
Where they're going to get that experience, though.
Just load up the compiler and go for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just load up the program. Say I'm going to write a program that does this today, and just do it.
There are a ton of resources on the net too, all kinds of free source code, information levels, everything. Use it to your maximum.
Well, back when I started, there wasn't really a net per se, and basically I learned all my stuff with books and stuff like that. I'm completely self-taught. I only finished high school and just started programming right away. And today, it's even easier because of the huge thing the net does. There's so much resources out there you can use to develop stuff. I use it daily in my work now, today. I'm working on some 3D graphics routine. Almost guaranteed there's somewhere on the net I can find an example or documentation of how to accomplish what I want to do. The net is a valuable resource for you guys today. In terms of university, something like that, going there, a university gives you the ability to experience a work environment, almost like a work type environment. You have to get your assignments done, you have to show up, you have to have responsibility. University to me demonstrates your ability to be responsible and develop and get your degree more than what you're actually learning. Commitment. If I see somebody with a university certificate, I know that they've got the ability to sit there and get something done and accomplish something. Now, in terms of your skills in programming, what have you done? Show me the games you've done. Show me the routines you've written. That piece of paper just tells me, okay, you can do a job, but what have you done? And that's, I think, almost everybody here will agree is when we look for a prospective programmer or something like that, it's what have you done?
In addition to that, education creates opportunities. You'll just learn, you'll meet more people, you'll get exposed to more things. The piece of paper at the end is always nice, but you'll learn a lot more through the process of life by going to more educational opportunities.
I think the other thing is that, one thing that worked for us is that when we were in college, we found other people who had the same interests, and you found really good coders and people who wanted to write games, and you can like meet other people who who are like you, and you can work off of that. And I think that I think the biggest thing that we look for as far as like college degrees is really shows the discipline and focus. And did you work really hard in school, or did you like blow it off because you didn't really see a point to it? Well, there obviously is a point to it, but going beyond that, we also look for what else they've done. And usually the top coders, they do the stuff in school, they get the fundamental background and stuff, whether it's like network programming. I took a network programming class, I can do this, this, and this. But then outside of class, I wrote this really cool program that does whatever. And or if it's a graphics programming class, and you get some background and you learn some OpenGL, and then you pick up some books at Barnes & Noble, or you look it up on the net and you run with it and you start writing your own demo programs. That's really where your personal initiative comes in, and that's very important because even when we hire somebody, we don't want to. Nobody wants to babysit you. You got to do your work, and you got like new problems you got to solve, and you got to solve them. You got to have the initiative to do that. And writing your own stuff and being able to show that you solve these problems and you figured this out, demonstrates that.
I think one of the greatest things about college in itself is that, in high school, almost everyone has a different direction, but when you go to college and you go for a specific degree, you are surrounded by a bunch of people who have generally the same focus, and then you meet people who have the exact same focus and the same career path that you have, and I say half the learning comes outside the classroom. You're hanging out with these buddies, you're buying the books, you're researching the web, you're doing stuff on your own, and that's really where the seeds of your future and what you want, that's where it's really going to sprout from. The piece of paper is good, but I think probably the greatest experience I got from college was really, in my dorm room, hacking it out with my friends, my buddies, and that's really where some of the best work and the greatest career path was really taken, at least for myself. I don't know about other guys.
One problem I had with school is I went into college thinking I was going to learn all this stuff about areas that I was interested in, all sorts of coding, but like what it turned out that it was so many core classes, and you have to decide for yourself whether you want to go into school or not, but you have to be prepared that you're not going to always be taking classes that are of interest to you. And there's so many times that I can't even imagine. There's just so many like electrical engineering classes I took, things like that, just not completely unrelated to games and the games industry. Just so much of that you have to do on the side. So it's a tough decision whether to go to school or not. But the experience in specializing, I think, is really key in the industry these days, just because the games are so complex. You can't know everything anymore. You really have to specialize if you want to get into the field.
I think the only thing I can add to that is that the really great thing about college is that it's the last time in your life when your primary expectation that's put upon you is that you'll learn, right? That's the last time when basically your identity as a student and most of what you do is learning stuff. And the computer science programs at most universities give you an opportunity to learn about games and to get experience kind of writing game samples and messing around with a bunch of stuff, because that's what you're supposed to be doing. And as far as specific universities and specific courses, I think most major universities now have a pretty good computer science program. We've been particularly impressed with the ones at most of the larger universities in Canada, specifically McGill, UBC, Waterloo. We've actually got a number of people on the DirectX team who graduated from the University of Waterloo. There is now actually a university, an accredited university for game design and development. That's the DigiPen School with campuses in Vancouver and now in Seattle, right down the street from us and Nintendo. And you can kind of approach them, but obviously, as you might imagine, they're sort of overwhelmed by resumes, and you'll be basically in the same position that you would be applying to work at a games company. You're going to have to already demonstrate some specialization, some experience, something unique about you. But in exchange, they're going to give you education. They're going to allow you a couple more years to build a greater portfolio, to learn stuff, to network, and to have exposure to games companies.
Well, one thing I just want to point out also that I consider very important also is just meeting people, Me and my brother went down to every E3. We didn't work in the industry. We would just like scam tickets somewhere and get into E3 and just walk around and just meet people. And, you know, it was just through all those efforts that I was able to get to know all these people here, as well as lots of other people in the industry also. And at least for what I'm trying to do, that's extremely invaluable. And these guys are all really approachable also. You know, it's really easy to like walk up to any of these guys in any sort of environment, here, E3, ECTS, anything else that's going on, just start talking to them. And if you got an idea, you can start talking to them about that idea also. And these guys are always willing to help also. That's one thing that I really like about the gaming industry. You know, there's this, you know, sort of comradeship between everybody. And everybody really likes working together, everybody's friends. You know, there's a little bit of headbutting, I guess, between like some of the major guys about products versus products. But really in the background, all these guys are really friends.
I just have one general comment. As you kind of go down your path to be either a game programmer or be in the games industry, I imagine a lot of you are now gamers wanting to be programmers and maybe not actually having programmed, maybe even to no degree at all. But as you start to get down the path, you may actually realize that, I actually like playing games more than trying to get into the industry. And you know, that's not a bad thing. You know, maybe it's something you just want to keep as maybe a full-time hobby, but maybe go off into other areas as well that maybe are related to gaming or absolutely have nothing to do with gaming. But you know, don't be surprised that as you get down that path, it's like, well, this isn't as fun as it used to be. You know, now that I'm in the industry, I realize that, well, God, I actually like playing games more than doing games. So, you know, that's not a bad decision either. But you know, it's just one of those life lessons with actually careers across the board. You know, someone who wants to be a fireman, for example, gets to be a fireman and realize, God, I actually like watching TV shows or the movies more than actually being one. So that's more just a general, you know, just a general rule of thumb. So.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. Before you even embark on this career path, you've got to know why you want to do it. You really have to know why you want to do it. If your reason is because I love games, it's probably not the right reason. If your reason is because I love programming and because I love getting in and just making things work and solving little problems and tracking down bugs, that's a good reason, right? I mean, that starts to get more closer to what people actually do in these jobs. It's sort of, you know, having a love and a passion for games is absolutely the number one priority for trying to go into this, because that's what's going to get you through it. But you know, through all of the sort of difficult times and the you know, the things that aren't as pleasant. But you've got to really understand why it is that you want to do that specific thing, and what you hope to, you know, what you hope to accomplish with your career.
Just along the lines of path you're going down, at what point is it really worth starting to look at getting jobs and approaching people in the industry? Because right now, I'm still finishing off high school. I've done a lot of programming. I really enjoy programming. I'm working with these guys, kind of trying to make their own company, getting all the points which you talked about. You know, the budget is getting way out of control and all this stuff. But I really do want to go to school. But at what point is it really worth starting to approach you guys to, you know, get into the industry, get a job? What kind of stuff do I have to have under my belt to actually, you know, have a chance at this?
Well, similar situation, I guess. But I think when you feel comfortable about like approaching, talking to, you know, the guys. I mean, there's really no hard, you know, set rule or anything like that. When you want to be able to, when you think you have something to show, you know, show for yourself, because that's really how you gain respect. Because you're able to show something that you're talented, and you've got, whether it's demos or written scripts, whatever it happens to be, you know, something unique, you know, something that makes you stand out and shows that you put a lot of hard work into it. You know, I think that's probably, you know, one of the best times you can do that. But, you know, as far as like, you know, if you're contemplating whether you're gonna like, start a company or whether you're gonna go to college, you know, I had that exact same, you know, problem face me. I decided to go to college and keep the company going. And boy, I mean, that was crazy. And I was doing 2 degrees as well, while I was trying to keep the company going like full time. And that was not fun, you know, and it was a lot of work, but you kind of worked through it. So my solution was to do both, and that was pretty insane. I don't know if I recommend that to anybody, but one thing I would recommend is again, you know, really specialize in what area you want to be focused in, whether it's programming, whether it's graphics programming, whatever, and be able to show that to people and be able to release stuff on the net. I mean, you could do so much now that you couldn't do, you know, just a few years ago. and be able to get some attention for your work.
I think it's actually pretty easy to determine when you want to approach somebody, but it takes a lot of insight. And here's how you do it. Imagine yourself in the role of the CEO of a games company or the lead programmer or something. Then imagine that you and 100 other people who all have relatively similar skills come in and apply for a job. Now, if you would hire yourself, or if you would at least give yourself an interview, that's probably about the time to start seeing if you could do it. It's a very fiercely competitive industry, and it's going to be more competitive as companies start to consolidate. There's probably way too many games that are being produced right now, so you're going to see consolidation. But there's always going to be space for people who have talent and can prove that they can do this. And so, if you hire yourself, and you got to pretend like you don't know it yourself and you don't love yourself, then that's probably a good rule of thumb.
And you're going to be able to get those insights by communicating with other people that are kind of in the industry and you see that, boy, the stuff that we're working on has a really cool niche, or it really addresses these particular areas better than anybody else's that I've seen. Then you've got some specific points that you can bring up with that fictitious CEO, so to speak, and you can say, yeah, I got something that really stands out here. I'm ready to go now.
Yeah, that's probably a better suggestion. If you could find somebody else who's a programmer, and again, this is where like going to college and that sort of stuff helps. If you can go to a professor and say, look, would you hire me if you were in, running a software company? Then again, you're probably the right.
I actually have a small suggestion. I'm run the human resource department of an e-commerce firm here in the city, and I've had people, and I'd recommend this, that if you consider them, they almost got the interview, but they didn't quite get it. Call the human resource department and ask why. Ask why you didn't get the interview. Ask what skills you need to improve on. I mean, worst could happen is the guy says, I don't have time, and hangs up the phone. But I mean, that's a huge insight right there as to why you didn't get the job.
We do that. I mean, at Microsoft, there's a very, very rigid and regimented hiring process, and you have to interview with like 5 or 6 different people, and they all write evaluations with you. And that's very important, so that you can justify the hire or no hire decision. And so that should all be available.
You had your hand up earlier.
I was just wondering, do you think it's possible for a current high school developers to actually publish a game?
Self-publish a game?
Like just by sharing it?
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, the great thing about the internet is that anybody can publish anything. The difficulty, the cost that's associated with getting in the industry is trying to get retail shelf space and trying to produce something that's actually in a box you can walk into a restaurant and you can buy at retail. That's very, very difficult. If you want to do something, absolutely. In fact, I mean, that's where I think a lot of people on this panel came from, was, that they had just done things on their own. They put it out there, somebody noticed it. I mean, that's how Richard got discovered, was that he just did really cool stuff. And I hear this all the time from people like John Romero and most of the names that you hear, that they hear about something really cool that somebody did, and they're like, oh, well, we got to talk to him. So as far as doing that, especially as a calling card, then that's absolutely right. It's really hard for you, though, to produce something that you think you're going to go to somebody for into retail. That's where it starts to get awkward, and that's where you need to apply all the tricks that we've been talking about here.
If you have a passion, though, you don't need shelf space, it's direct sales. You'll get it done if you want to.
Promotions are required, though. The promotion, you advertise, and get into the product scene. That's what really is going to make a difference. If you do have something that's worthwhile, trying to get your own publishing on the ground. That's where your biggest expense is. And again, that's why they said earlier, Microsoft was saying, that is the biggest expense, and that's why publishers incur the risk.
Yeah, I think one of the best examples of self-publishing something to me was CTF. I sat down and I wrote it and developed it, and I got various other people who were in the same position I was. They all wanted to get into the industry, and we all got together and I did the first level pack of 8 levels. Half the guys who built those levels currently work in companies like Iron Storm, Virtual, and all kinds of stuff. And that's because we were all in the same boat. We wanted to get together and build a product and put it out the net to get the recognition for it. And a lot of CTF work for me. It was not just writing the code and putting the maps together and doing the art. It was getting out there, emailing websites, emailing companies, saying, hey, here's a CTF product. Hey, there's hundreds of people, thousands of people playing this every day, and getting myself recognized. And doing interviews on shows like QuakeCast, and real audio interviews and stuff like that. Getting out there, promoting yourself, promoting your product, and saying, hey, this is what I can do. Hire. And for me, it was very successful. I'm successful with all the other people that contribute to the CTF project. You know, and that's basically how a big way to get into this industry is the net and promoting on the net and getting the recognition. If every game developer here reads out those gaming sites every day, you know, if you're on that site 3-4 times in a month, we'll see it and we'll start taking recognition.
Get ready for a lot of email Monday morning, Blue.
There's something that I always tell budding game developers or even journalists that want to break in is that you got to find the fine line between persistence and annoyance. And it really is a fine line. But just everybody here on this panel has said how competitive the industry is, and it is, and how awesome the web is as a medium to get recognized and to, you know, find somebody's phone number or email address or fax number or page or whatever. But you break it up and you got to understand, like, for every one of you guys, there's like cities all over the place that where people are also talking about doing the same thing. And unfortunately, there's some really talented people that just don't have the brass in their pants to get out there and not break down doors. And that's what's going to separate the people that get work, you know, that don't. Maybe I'm exaggerating too much, but really, you gotta grab somebody by the collar and, you know, and make yourself known, because there are a lot of talented programmers and artists and animators and level designers that don't have the guts to email, you know, somebody at id or Ritual or somebody, and they're the ones that get left behind. So aside from having talent, which obviously is something that's, you know, needless to say, but you gotta get yourself known. And Mark touched on this earlier. Going to things like Gamescon or trying to sneak into E3 or something like that, putting a face to the name is invaluable. You know, print up some business cards, carry some CDs with code, or carry a design document on a diskette or something. Putting a face to the name is so much more important, and then follow up. You know, a week after E3, follow up with a phone call or email and say, hey, I met you at so-and-so. And that does a world of difference, because people get lazy with the internet now, because you can live in Tuktoyaktuk and make a game and email it. I don't know where I came up with that, but you can live in, well, let's face it, I live in Canada like you guys do, and that's an obstacle right there, because we can easily get to so-and-so city. Like, you know, we're not near Silicon Valley, and we're not near Texas in the heart of the 3D shooters, you know. And so, I mean, it's like, you know, you gotta do, and you gotta save up your money and go and meet face to face and follow up. And you're like miles ahead of everybody else if you can do that.
Actually, one of the things that you touched on that I think is really true is sort of the difference between pestering and being, you know, very proactive. And it's really simple, kind of how to determine which one you're doing. What you want to do when you talk to somebody in the industry is you want to go make the best presentation that you can. They're going to evaluate it probably fairly quickly, whatever it is that you presented to them. And then they're going to tell you yes or no. At that point, it's basically done, right? Trying to say, well, but you just don't get my vision. The conversation is over at that point. What you need to do is say, okay, you don't like what I did, or there's something I need to do. What is it that you don't like about it? Then go back and try to address whatever that issue is. That's what we all do with our products. That's what we do with DirectX. That's what we do with games, right? You put it out. Some people are not going to like your product. Some people are going to have a lot of issues with it. Instead of kind of saying, well, but you just don't understand. The thing that we all do is to say, okay, well, what didn't you like about it, and how can I, you know, the next time I come talk to you, how can I show you that I did what you said I needed to do? And that's how you're persistent, right? You come back and you say, John Carmack, you know, you didn't like my visibility algorithm last time because it had these problems. Well, I've addressed that. I've done this other thing. Well, you know, it's still kind of silly. Okay, well, how's it silly now? Okay, thank you very much. And then you come back 6 months later with that addressed.
I think you'd be surprised at how receptive you'll get the answers to those questions too. You present something to a name developer and they dismiss it and say, why? You'll probably get a nice, big, long conversation. Why? Because we like looking at new stuff. We like looking at things, and we see something that's interesting but, you know, has some problems. We'll probably tell you. You know, I know a lot of people have like emailed John Carmack and said, hey, you know, a guy working on some new light program or something, and John sends them 4 paragraphs of what's wrong with it. You know, I like that.
Well, we all respond to people who are, you know, basically really trying to talk to us. I mean, we're all people and so on. However, there's one thing, like especially over the internet, you know, make an effort. If you're emailing somebody, make an effort to actually, know who this person is. I mean, it doesn't even have to be like the top of the company, talk to a level designer or an artist or something. Send them an email and talk to them direct. If it's very obvious, you're just like, going down the line and vomiting out like 100 messages out to everyone, or give an exact same pitch to everyone, and you don't know who you're talking to. We can read that in a second, and we're just tune out. If these people don't really want to talk to us, why should we really pay that much attention to them unless they've got something really awesome to show? So.
And never approach at the end of a game.
Yeah. I'm too busy for that.
I have a quick question here, actually. It's not so much with regards to individuals getting into the gaming industry. It's actually probably directed more towards the guys at Vicarious, but maybe anyone here can comment. At what stage, if you have a company and you have a product that you feel you want to put into the gaming industry, at what stage should you approach a publisher? Is it the prototyping stage? And more importantly, what is it exactly that the publisher is going to want to look for? Is it simply going to be, a demo reel, or is it going to be something much more established, the way the game's going to work, what kind of graphic engine you're going to use? When is it the right time to go after a publisher?
I think that's a really good question. I think the two key things that you need is a very good pitch document and a demo, a prototype, something that illustrates your work. But it needs to be immediate as to why it's unique and why it would sell. And you need to address that in the pitch document right away. Just cut to the chase, because there's so many different games out there, and they aren't terribly original, and your product is just going to look like everything else unless you can immediately state in first sentence or two why this product is unique and why it's going to sell.
So a lot of it you think does come down to the initial pitch.
It does come down to the pitch, but you need to be able to show the product as well, because publishers see hundreds and hundreds of design docs and all sorts of stuff. It's not cool to send them a 100-page design doc or something, and hey, look at all this work that I put into it. That doesn't matter. Something really slim. Something even that's 3 or 4 pages tops, that essentially just systematically goes down and states what's unique about the product, why it would sell. A little bit of a summary of what the product is, and show some of the originality there, and some of the features that make the product stand out. And you have to really show that you understand the market, because they're not interested in products that don't sell, obviously. And you can demonstrate your knowledge of the market and be able to say, well, this is what the market is, this is what this product does better, more improved, innovative in these areas. And you need to be able to follow up with that with a demonstration where it's needed. Now, one of the things that we found is very challenging with a game like Terminus is that it's a very cool concept, but it's a very complex world, and you need to put some effort into it to really see all the intricacies of it. And early on, when we didn't have a prototype that demonstrated all of what's cool, you couldn't really distinguish it from another title, except that we planned to do X, Y, and Z. And at that point, publishers are like, well, you guys are on crap, you guys are going to be able to pull this off. And so, those are, very real questions. And by systematically going back and not being an annoyance, you really find out, well, what are the problem areas? Even up until recently, a few months back, one of the major problem areas for Terminus was the learning curve was really pretty steep because of its physics, the Newtonian physics engine and all that kind of stuff. By asking the publishers, well, what is it that they're looking for? What do you think is wrong with it? Even if they don't quite understand the product, their points are very valid because that's how they've interpreted it. And you're able to fine-tune your presentation and then, also your product as well to show that you can say, okay, you said to me a couple months ago, these are the problem areas. Look at this now. We've corrected these problem areas, and this is why. And you get a better understanding of what you're creating, but you have to really put it in perspective into the market, And I think when you start getting an idea of that, that's probably the right time. Not only do you have the materials, but you have a pretty good understanding of where the product's going to go. But the other thing you need to show in the pitch document is that you're going to be able to deliver. As far as what's the product timeline? Do you need financing for the product? How reliable is the group? Are they going to stick it through? Because finishing is so hard, and that's what they're looking for.
I guess supplemental, you actually touched on it just now by mentioning financing, is if we already have a certain amount of financing in place, What have you found from your own experiences has been the best way to achieve additional financing? Has it been going and presenting your company to be financed in, or going after project to project? What I'm saying is it easier to pitch a project as opposed to the overall company?
Project is important, but I mean, when people invest in you, I mean, we've had money come in through private investors. They're investing in the people and your credibility. Are you going to be able to just stick it through and make it happen? And so it's just as much presenting your company and the people as it is the product. And I would gauge it as equally as important.
It's time to pitch a publisher when you can answer the two questions that are on their mind. How am I going to sell this to customers, to consumers, and how am I going to be assured that you're going to actually show up and deliver? So, there is no sort of right time to pitch, because the key to the pitch document is basically to show them this is what you're going to say to customers to make them buy this game. And if you can't sell the publisher, there's no way the publisher is going to sell the consumer. And also, as far as the demo goes, I mean, again, it's mitigating risk. If you can turn up with a finished game that just needs to go into the box, just needs to be tested going in the box, then they have a reasonable amount of expectation that's actually going to ship, which is why a lot of times you see distribution deals go with attached with higher royalty rates and higher advances, because they know what they're buying. There's not a whole lot of risk associated with it relative to, I've got an idea in my head and here's some character sketches. So sort of the later in the process you can go, the better. But unfortunately, you're probably going to want to go early so that you can get financing, and so that you can lock down your deals, so you can get promotions set up. There is actually some downside to going too late in the process, because we've seen titles come out from publishers that Crack.com did this with their first game. They went to EA, they pitched very, very late in development for a distribution deal. And so EA said, ooh, good, something we can get fourth quarter revenue on. And so they popped it in a box and shipped it out. And nobody had really heard about it. EA didn't get behind it with a whole bunch of marketing. Right? The title didn't do that well. So, it's a very fine line. You've got to convince them that it's far enough along that it's just, it's on the down slope as far as risk goes. But on the other hand, it's got to be early enough that they feel some investment, they feel some requirement to get behind it and push it.
And the publisher actually just winds up betting on you, and the more money they have to bet, or the riskier the investment, the less money you'll make. Talking to a lot of these startup companies, one thing that is pretty true is you won't make money in your first product. You will hopefully live as a company and survive and make a name for yourself. And based on the success of that first product, you'll be able to make money on your second, third, and fourth projects. But it's pretty unrealistic to think that you're going to get rich on the first project.
Definitely agree with that.
I want to step back a little ways in the whole production of the path, I guess. In terms of making a demo or first game, what speaks more to you? An actual full-fledged game with all the, the menu screen and all the options and, all the little tail ends closed up? Or just a demo that gives you the, aspects of the game that are unique? In terms of making a name for us, what speaks more to you? A demo or a full game?
As a company or as an individual worker looking for everything?
I guess personally I'm interested in both.
Well, as a company, you have to do, you have to demonstrate that you can finish something. As an individual programmer or an artist, you want to be able to demonstrate some sort of discrete functionality. You can point and say, I did this thing, and it's really unique. So it really depends on what you want to do.
Well, I want to say there's only one question for games is fun. That's the only question that has to be answered.
But if you want to be a programmer, then you have to show, I did this thing that another one.
And Sid Meier said that you don't finish a game, you just stop working on it. if you leave a developing team,
for Sid.
Yeah. But I mean, it's true. You gotta. Again, it goes back to the school, the discipline thing. At school, you're expected to have a deadline. You got that essay due on Friday. You don't do it. If you don't go to university and your buddies say, why are you wasting your time at university? I got a great job at whatever. But you want to get in the gaming industry, that's what it's all about. It's the bottom dollar. And a publisher has milestones that they expect from the developers, that you got to have 25% of the game by March 20th or, whatever. So it's one of those things about school. It's one of those trade-off things. You learn about discipline, about meeting deadlines, and planning up to that deadline to have X amount of hours dedicated to this amount of process. So, totally off track. I'm sorry.
Any other questions, though?
Well, listening to you guys talk, I know you're at a level of programming and artistry and all that hip stuff that I'm not quite at yet. But in the meantime, I'm going to have to support myself. I'm wondering if you guys know of people who have kind of taken semi-jobs, like you were talking about how you worked as a tech support guy for a while, answering phones while you learned the information you need to get into the field. I guess, you guys have any ideas of how people kind of bridge careers in order to get into what you guys are doing?
It's 7-Eleven before I got
Some companies hire a lot of contract help as well, so you might want to work through a contracting agency to get into, some of the larger companies, probably some of the smaller ones too, where they just need some temporary help. That's, pretty much how I got into Microsoft, was through contracting. So that's another possibility.
I think any way you can.
Yeah.
Related to the passion, I started out doing it for free. I was going to give them the stuff for free, just put my name on the game.
Internships are, some companies offer internships, and we do that sometimes. We also like to bring in co-ops for certain positions. We'll bring in for a defined amount of time, and it's not as expensive. And you can basically take the risk on on talent, where you see some talent and they could be really good at this job and they'll learn on the job, and then you'll be able to tell pretty quickly, are they doing an effective job at what they're able to do, and how interested are they in other aspects of the company. And are they, one of the things that you should do is that if you do get on the ground floor at a company, find out everything you can, like try and get involved without stepping on anybody's shoes. Really take an active role and have a very positive attitude, and show that interest and that you're willing to do whatever it takes, because whatever it takes is so important, and people will be able to recognize you for that. And also all the time there'll be like odd jobs and stuff that comes up, and then they're like, oh, so and so might be able to do that. He's been like gung ho about taking on whatever, and you get those sort of jobs and you get that kind of experience and you're able to build off of that.
I was just going to say, even working in a computer store, selling computer products and stuff like that, that'll help feed your own habit, essentially. You get discounts on, or you might be able to get discounts on buying your computers and the next generation products and stuff while you're learning about the industry. So maybe not necessarily working in the game industry, but working that's, in a related field again, where you really got your finger on the pulse of things and able to kind of help subsidize your own desires and wants, that being a game developer, programmer, whatever.
I was just going to touch on what Karthik just said. A lot of you guys are in high school and you're wondering what direction to take. If you do take the path of college and Karthik said co-op, that's probably one of the things you want to look for. I mean, internships are great, and a lot of times you say, hey, I'll work for free, and the guy will listen to you, and maybe you can get in, and they'll say, sure, you can get me coffee, whatever. But I mean, the actual co-op foundation in schools have a lot of deep roots in a lot of local companies wherever they're stationed. And a lot of times it's actually fit into the curriculum. I mean, I went to RIT, which works on trimesters, and by the time you're junior, you do like double co-ops. You're gone for, 9 months at a company. And if you do like all these other guys said, whether it's a job, internship, or a co-op, if you get in the door and you work for them, do more than what they just hired you for. Obviously, try to learn from the guys that are there, put in the extra effort. If there's something that's slagging in another department, offer to help or come in for extra hours, whatever. Because ultimately, these people might want to hire you when you're done, or you might be able to use them as resources to go to a country or wherever.
You have contacts with the
Just co-ops are great. I mean, if you guys are looking for, and I don't know if there's any artists out there, but the other thing is, if you are an artist and you're looking for that, look for a school that obviously has computers and the software, like the high-end stuff, like Alias Wavefront stuff, down to Soft Image or 3D Studio Max. Buy the stuff and play as much as you can. So.
One of the other things I want to mention is that if you're in high school and you're looking for part-time jobs and stuff, it's not a bad idea to try and see if you can muscle up get a job at EB or computer science or something like that. Just because you're working in the business at the retail level but you start to get a really good understanding of what's going on. You talk with customers and stuff, and try to understand like the market and the industry from that perspective, because that just goes such a long way. Because you kind of get a better perspective, not just from being in front of a monitor and playing games, but you get to like understand who's buying these games and what kind of games they're buying and all that kind of stuff. It really helps a lot. And I've met like guys who've like worked at like EB and Coffee Say, and I strike up a conversation, and it's like, hey, I'm a developer, and depending on where you are, they're probably like developers or people who want to break into the business, and you never know who you're going to meet. And any way you can, just being sort of tied to it to work off of is good. I mean, one thing that I did, I was able to. I worked all sorts of odd jobs and stuff, but then I wound up, getting a job, with tech support to some degree. But I also was able to do those trade shows, and that was just invaluable because that's how I, built a big roster of contacts and making friends who people who will help out, people who know people, that kind of thing, and whatever it takes, really.
One key element that's kind of coming out here as well is, stand out, whether it's yourself as a person working the extra effort, putting in the extra effort, or delivering a game that actually delivers on its promises and maybe even over-delivers. You really need to go beyond what's expected of you. Again, whether it's at a personal level or even at a game level, you really need to over-deliver to stand out from the rest of the crowd because, there's thousands of people that are in the same position as you guys, probably hundreds of, well, tens of thousands.
Think of your career as like the ultimate real-time strategy game, right? I mean, there's some way. There's some people who play real-time strategy games and they know exactly how they're going to do this level. They're going to go this way, this way, this way, this way, this way. But the most successful strategy gamers that I've seen are the ones that kind of go, well, okay, I'm going to kind of have these 4 different things in mind, and I'm going to see what happens, and I'm going to kind of go around it. If you start off by saying, okay, I'm going to get 10 of my buddies together, and we're going to go do like a game, and we're going to go get a publisher. And that goes back to risk. That's a very risky proposition. If you go, well, I'm going to do this, and I'm also going to be building contacts myself with game companies, and maybe I'll take a part-time job answering phones at in tech support, or I'm going to do this and that. One of those things is likely to pan out, and sort of the idea is that you may go sort of a number of different ways out, but then ultimately the idea is to kind of come back to the direction that you wanted to end up anyway. So it's sort of like that. The start of the game and the end game are pretty well defined, but the middle game can go all kinds of different directions. And if you're open to that and you're looking for those kinds of opportunities, you're going to be a lot more likely to be successful.
Any other questions at all? No? Anybody else have anything they'd like to share?
Just one quick question.
Sure.
How many of you people actually were at one point or another part of a bunch of high school kids who wanted to make a company?
I was.
One? Just 2 you guys?
Sure.
Thanks.
It can be done.
Okay, well, we'd like to thank you all for coming, and don't hesitate to talk to any of these people also. If you've got any questions or anything like that, as I said before, they're very easily approachable, and you'll just find them wandering around. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.